A few months ago, I drove into the city for a funeral. And when I returned to my car, parked just a few blocks from the synagogue, I noticed a familiar orange notice on my windshield. A parking ticket, an expensive one. The whole episode felt deeply unfair to be slapped with this ticket coming out of a devastating funeral. As I recall it, I didn't take the matter as well as I could have. I was animated as I complained about the fine, and a doorman was standing nearby watching the whole scene unfold, and he pointed that the back of my car had just crossed the threshold of a bus stop. I felt embarrassed by my mistake. I felt ashamed when I remembered that I was still wearing my kippah. I don't normally wear a kippah in public, and in that moment, that man and anyone who might have seen me saw not just another New Yorker throwing a fit, but a Jew throwing a fit. And when I wear my kippah in public, I signal that I am a Jew, and that my behavior, righteous or shameful, reflects accordingly on my community. I've been thinking a lot about this episode in studying this week's portion, which contains a detailed account of the glorious garments worn by the priest in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, in the Jewish people's first house of worship. In his Bigdei Kodesh, his holy garments, the priest was especially aware of his sacred duties. On his shoulders and on a breastplate covering his heart, he carried stones engraved with the names of the tribes of Israel, much like the mantle that covers the precious Torah scroll at the heart of our sanctuary. And within that breastplate, he carries the Urim and the Tumim, a decision-making device, effectively a holy 8-ball, the precise mechanics of which the sages debated. And above his eyes, he wore a plate of gold with the inscription, "Holy to God." And the hem of his garments was decorated with pomegranates and golden bells, a visual and auditory reminder of the commandments that dictated the priest's responsibility. And the Bigdei Kodesh continually directed the priest's attention to his people, to Torah, and to God. And these holy garments are democratized as the entire children of Israel are instructed to add fringes, tzitzit, to their garments and to place the words of Torah as a sign between the eyes, giving us this talit and tefillin. And further, many talitot or talesim, if you prefer, are decorated with symbols of the 12 tribes of Israel, just like the breastplate of the high priest. And the idea behind wearing ritual garments as reminders to conduct ourselves as a nation of priests is a noble one. After all, we sing in the liturgy that we're supposed to live by Torah and mitzvot and meditate on them day and night and speak of them at home and on the road. And so talitot and kippot can help us toward this purpose. In reality, the subject of public markers of Jewish identity is complicated. While it can be empowering to choose to wear visual expressions of Jewishness, throughout history, the Jewish people have had no choice. Even as Jews largely enjoyed protected status as people of the book in the medieval Islamic kingdoms, Jews and Christians were required to distinguish themselves through distinctive dress. And while Jews largely wore the same fashion as their neighbors, they were identified by honey-colored garments, by buttons on their caps and patches on their sleeves. And throughout the kingdoms of Europe, Jews were set aside through physical markers: yellow badges in France, blue stripes in Sicily, pointed hats in Germany, red capes in Hungary, white badges resembling the Ten Commandments in England, although that actually sounds kind of nice. The late 16th century composer Salomone Rossi was famously very highly regarded in Mantua, that he was exempt from wearing the mandatory yellow Jewish badge. And so perhaps this is why, when emancipated Jews across Western and Central Europe were afforded greater opportunity to integrate into the emerging nation states, they increasingly abandoned Jewish markers, not just in public, but in worship. And among the aesthetic and liturgical innovations of the reformers of Germany and the US was the rejection of ritual dress like the talit, tefillin, and headdresses. And in 1885, the leaders of the Reform movement in the United States declared that the Mosaic, as in Moses, and rabbinical laws that regulate diet, priestly purity, and dress originated in ages and under the influence of ideas entirely foreign to our present mental and spiritual state. They failed to impress the modern Jew with a spirit of priestly holiness. Their observance in our days is apt rather to obstruct, rather to further modern spiritual elevation. And yet, over the past half century or so, and as we have seen play out here at WRT, we realize just how much we lose when we strip Judaism of all its ritual garments. Today, we cherish the talitot of our grandfathers brought to this country. We proudly wrap our benot mitzvah in them, and we spread them over the chuppah. We've learned that to wrap ourselves in such an heirloom can feel something like how the priests must have felt as they placed the names of the tribes of Israel upon their shoulders and hearts. We've learned the power of wearing a Jewish star or a mezuzah or a hamsa around our necks and close to our hearts, and how visible or concealed they can evoke the memory of the loved one who passed them to us, how they can serve as a source of quiet strength, a reminder of our identity in a threatening world. And still, many of us choose not to wear Jewish identifiers in public. And when we consider our past, we might view it as a great victory to be able to choose for ourselves how or even whether to display our Jewishness. Yet now, that many of us feel that it is unsafe to do so, even if we wanted to. And according to a new study by the American Jewish Committee, in the past year, nearly half of Jewish respondents have stopped publicly wearing Jewish stars and yarmulkes or posting material online that could identify them as Jews. And now it can feel like an act of bravery to wear one of these symbols. How shameful is that? I don't want to wear a kippah as an act of defiance. My kippah is not a political pin. In our Torah portion, the priest wears the holy garments lechavod ul tifaret, so that he will carry himself with honor and with glory. And the daily morning liturgy captures the same idea. We are taught to recite a series of blessings that accompanies each step of the morning routine. We have a blessing for the alarm clock, it's true, a blessing for getting out of bed, for getting dressed, and so on. And the last of these, just before leaving home and re-entering the public world, is a blessing for putting on a head covering. We say, Oter Yisrael betifara. Blessed is the one who crowns Israel with glory. And even as many Jews have stopped wearing head coverings, our Reform prayer book has still retained this blessing. And we don't need to physically put on a kippah or a Jewish star or a hamsa. The blessing, the beauty of it, is that it's universal. In ancient times, there was nothing inherently Jewish about putting on a cap or a headscarf. Everyone did this, regardless of faith or gender. And each of us can choose to re-enter the public world every morning as though we have a crown on our heads, to exude honor and glory, not in some boastful way, but simply to comport ourselves with peace, with righteousness and courage, to live as the priest's garments directed them with a devotion to our community and Torah and justice and God. And if physical markers of Judaism inherently make us ambassadors, Can we choose to live as ambassadors, whether we wear them or not? Whether we are personally Jewish or whether we share a family with Jews? Can we talk openly about Jewishness and teach all that is beautiful about our teachings and our way of life? Can we share our family stories and traditions and recipes, the ways we mourn and celebrate, the songs that we sing in this sanctuary, the prayers that we recite for love and wisdom, hope, healing, gratitude, peace? Can we continue to talk about Israel while showing that there is so much more to Israel and Jewish life than the current war and the decades of conflict? Once again, we find ourselves in a world that is trying to impose limits and labels on what it means to be a Jew. But we know only those within our community can define and communicate who we are. No one can remove this crown from us. Shabbat Shalom.